Have you ever noticed yourself feeling anxious when nothing was actually wrong? There was no bad news, no pressure, no story running in your head, and yet your body was ready, braced. And I don't mean worried, I mean alert, ready, slightly ahead of the moment. And for a long time, that confused me because on the surface, nothing was wrong. Life was functioning, the day was ordinary, and yet something in me was already on standby. What I eventually realized is that moments like this aren't just about the nervous system. They're often about the soul sensing a shift before the rest of us catch up. That might sound dramatic at first, but it really isn't. It's actually very ordinary, and most of us have felt this without having language for it. See, the soul notices orientation before the mind does, and the body responds long before thought has a chance to explain anything. And once I started paying attention to that bracing, certain moments began to stand out even more clearly. There was one night when everything looked settled. The dishes were done, the bills were paid, there were no deadlines pressing, and I was sitting still enough that, by most definitions, calm should have been my default. And yet my body just wouldn't settle. My breath kept stopping halfway down, like it didn't quite trust the floor beneath me. My legs were restless for no clear reason, and there was this low hum of alertness running through me, like background electricity that you only notice once the room goes quiet. I remember thinking how strange it felt because nothing seemed wrong. And that was the first time it really landed for me that anxiety doesn't always arrive attached to a situation. Sometimes it shows up when the system itself hasn't found coherence yet. Not because something bad is happening, but because something is reorganizing underneath awareness. And that realization stayed with me because the same sensation kept appearing in very ordinary places, like walking through a grocery store or sitting at a red light, lying in bed at night with nothing particular on my mind, while my nervous system hummed like a fridge you forgot was even there. Eventually, the question I was asking changed. See, I stopped wondering what I was anxious about and I started wondering what my system was responding to. And that little shift changed everything. When I paid attention at that level, something became really obvious. Anxiety often shows up when different parts of us are moving at different speeds. So our thoughts run ahead, scanning the future. Breath lags behind, shallow and guarded. And the body carries tension that doesn't quite match the moment. It feels like an internal conversation where the timing is off, or like you're watching a movie and the action is out of step with the dialogue. Yeah, and that's where it became tangible for me. So coherence isn't an abstract idea, it's a felt state. It's what happens when breath, body, attention, and soul are all moving in the same direction at the same tempo. And when that alignment holds, yeah, the system feels grounded, oriented, and reliable, even when life is demanding. When that alignment loosens, that's when anxiety begins to appear. So what it feels like from the inside isn't danger. It feels more like information, like the body is signaling that something in the internal field isn't synchronized yet. And I didn't arrive at this idea intellectually. I didn't read it somewhere and just decide to believe it. It emerged slowly through repetition. I started watching how my body responded before my mind had time to narrate anything. I noticed how certain environments settled me immediately, while others stirred something up without any warning. And I watched breath patterns change long before emotions were named. One of the clearest examples came while doing something really simple, and it was while walking my dog. Same route, same pace, same time of day. Yet, some days my body felt at ease. Other days it felt slightly exposed, like it was tracking something just beyond the edge of awareness. The difference wasn't outside of me, it was internal coherence. On the settled days, my attention stayed fully present. My breath deepened naturally. My body moved as a single unit, and even patience came easily without any effort. On the unsettled days, my awareness floated ahead while my body lagged behind, carrying tension like a delayed message that hadn't been delivered yet. And that delay is what creates anxiety. From the inside, it feels like being partially elsewhere while still having to function here. The soul stays present, consciousness stays alert, and the body works overtime trying to translate signals that are arriving out of rhythm. And the body always adapts. That part matters. See, the body isn't malfunctioning in these moments, it's compensating. And here's where it began to make deeper sense for me. The soul carries direction, not in words or plans, but in orientation. It knows where things are heading before there's language for it. The same way a compass senses north without needing any instructions. Consciousness is how that direction starts to show up. It appears as subtle shifts in attention, in what you notice, in what suddenly holds your focus, in what feels important before you can actually even explain why. So consciousness leans somewhere before the mind catches on. The body picks up on that immediately. Posture shifts, breath adjusts, pacing changes, muscle tone tightens or softens, and most of this happens below any awareness. The body's reading the field and trying to stay coordinated with what's arriving through consciousness. When soul, consciousness, and body are moving together, the system feels settled. When the soul has already shifted orientation and consciousness has begun reorganizing around that shift, the body starts adjusting too. If thought hasn't caught up yet, the body is working without a clear map. And that's when vigilance shows up. See, vigilance feels like anxiety, and it often appears without any obvious reason. And I noticed this most clearly during periods when my life looked stable on the surface. Work was functioning, relationships felt steady, and routines were fully intact. And yet, inside, my orientation had already changed. Not in a way that demanded immediate action, but more like a quiet turn. What felt meaningful was reorganizing, and energy was no longer fully committed to the same directions, even though my days were still built around them. So I was living inside a structure that still worked, while my internal compass had already turned. That gap produced anxiety long before anything visible changed. So the nervous system sensed that mismatch early, and it responded faithfully by tightening, speeding up, staying alert, trying to hold coherence across those signals that weren't arriving at the same time. So the way this finally came together for me was surprisingly simple. The soul carries direction, meaning, and orientation. It doesn't reason, it recognizes. Consciousness expresses that recognition as awareness before language. So behavior is where consciousness begins moving through form, through posture, breath patterns, pacing, micro choices, tone and timing. Thought arrives after all of that. Yeah, it narrates. It narrates what's already in motion. The body expresses consciousness before thought becomes aware of it. And awareness is almost always lagging behind the field. And that lag is where anxiety appears. See, the soul has already shifted orientation. Consciousness has reorganized, behavior and physiology have adjusted, and thought is catching up. And that gap feels like unease. Now, when thought aligns with what the body and behavior are already carrying, coherence returns and the system begins to settle. So seen this way, anxiety carries intelligence. It reflects a system working hard to stay upright while receiving mixed timing across layers of the self. Life is moving, the soul is orienting, and the mind is still updating. When coherence returns, anxiety often softens without needing to be managed or fixed. And I felt this happen literally mid-breath. Nothing was solved, nothing was decided, and yet my breath deepened, my posture shifted, and my attention returned fully into my body, and the background hum just dropped away. And that drop is unmistakable. The body recognizes coherence immediately. Consciousness settles back into form, and something feels right without any explanation. This also helps to explain why certain practices can calm anxiety quickly. Anything that restores internal alignment tends to help, like slow rhythmic breathing or walking in nature, creative work that absorbs your attention fully, or even honest conversation that brings inner truth closer to outer expression. Each of these invites coherence back online. They're not calming you down, they're helping the system synchronize again. Here's the part that took me the longest to trust. Anxiety doesn't always mean something is wrong. Sometimes it means something wants alignment, a direction, a rhythm, a truth that's waiting to be lived more fully. See, the body senses those shifts early because that's its job, that's its role. It translates the field long before the mind catches up. And once I stopped treating anxiety like an enemy and started listening to it as feedback, The whole relationship changed. The sensation stayed physical. The messages became clearer and the fear softened. So anxiety began to feel less like a threat and more like a tuning signal. Yeah, I still feel it sometimes, even just standing in the kitchen or lying awake at night, walking that same route. The difference now is that I recognize it as information about coherence rather than a problem with me. So I pause, I breathe, and I notice whether my attention has drifted ahead of my body again, whether my life is slightly out of step with what my soul already knows. Usually the system answers quickly, and life continues. Not resolved, not perfected, just aligned enough to move forward. Thank you.